We say, well, first of all, in the beginning, there was nothing but gas and rock. And then intelligence happened to arise in it, you know, like a sort of fungus or slime on the top of the whole thing. But we're thinking in a way, you see, that disconnects the intelligence from the rocks. Where there are rocks, watch out. Watch out, because the rocks are going eventually to come alive.
Most people still tend to think of evolution, whether it's biological or Darwinian evolution or cosmic evolution, as simply a materialistic, mechanistic worldview. But really it is not. And as that opening clip there of Alan Watt kind of emphasizes, ultimately deep down, an honest appraisal of the theory of evolution is that it is mysticism and it is pantheism. It's pantheism because it says that the universe is self-creating and self-organizing, and that everything is matter and energy, and that matter and energy are interchangeable. But then there's always that pesky question of consciousness. What is consciousness? Are you as a human being in your conscious mind really an independent thinking being with independent thought? Or are you ultimately just a function of a deterministic, mechanistic universe? So the person trying to hold on to the allegedly scientific fact of evolution is faced with a choice. They have to choose between either consciousness is a complete illusion and meaningless, and therefore their whole identity as a human being, which seems to have choice, seems to have true personhood, is all a lie, it's all an illusion. It's all just, you're just a collection of random chemicals and atoms and energy that randomly organized itself and will eventually disorganize and reorganize into a different organism or a different form. Or in order to avoid such a nihilistic conclusion, the person will embrace the idea that consciousness is real and therefore everything is part of that consciousness. Everything in the self-creating, self-organizing universe must therefore be self-creating and self-organizing because it is a part of that true consciousness, that true personhood that permeates everything. And thus you've gone full circle back to the ancient mystical belief we call pantheism. And so from this framework of evolution and consciousness, it's honestly not surprising at all to see people embracing the idea that other conscious beings that were self-created out in other parts of the self-organizing cosmos, other beings, other aliens, could be understood as just consciousness, entities that don't even need a body, that they've evolved back to that point of pure consciousness, and thus, the connection of things like DMT with the quest for extraterrestrial intelligence follows this very natural, logical path. And that's exactly where we are.
the most powerful psychedelic drug known to man. It's in every single ecosystem all over the world. It exists in plants and grasses, and it's everywhere. I mean, it's really the craziest drug to be illegal everywhere because everyone's got it in their system. It's like everyone's holding. That was like Terence McKenna's line. Yeah, and it's pretty intense stuff, man. If you do it, you will talk to intelligent beings from other dimensions, for real. I mean, it sounds crazy. You would think that if there's something like that, that it would be on the front page. It's amazing that people don't know about it. I mean, it's the most incredible experience. I mean, we are such an experience-obsessed society. I mean, everybody wants to go whitewater rafting, and people want to talk about, you know, my uncle climbed Mount Everest. It's all about experiences. We all want to ride roller coasters and see the craziest movies. There is a little powder, and you smoke this little powder, and it will change the way you look at everything. You won't care about UFOs. If a UFO landed right out there, I'd be like, wow, yeah, they're probably from another planet. Whatever. It's not DMT. DMT is 100,000 times crazier than that. It's like mushrooms times 1,000,000 plus aliens. That's what it's like. And literally, I mean, it sounds, it's crazier than you could possibly imagine or describe. If you take DMT, you will communicate with something, and it's so beyond description that me talking about it is like trying to explain a kaleidoscope to a blind man. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Like, there's no way you could explain it. I mean, it's so beyond anything you can explain. But something communicates with you when you do this stuff. And my words do it no justice. The craziest thing about DMT, because DMT is literally like having a meeting with God. It's like having a meeting with divine, unbelievably wise, incredibly loving energy, like whatever it is, the source of everything. And it leaves you so humbled that after it's over, you have it's like literally like you're still you still look like you still wear the same clothes you are, but you're not really you anymore. I mean, you literally have been changed. You know, you have experienced something that very few humans experience. And the thought to me that people can go through their entire lives and not know about this is an incredible waste of time. It's like your life could be so much more positive and so much more interesting and fascinating, and you would be so much more humble and aware of what you really are and where you really stand if you just have this experience.
Hey guys, it's KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube. Now this story right here just came out a few months ago, and I thought it was really interesting. I wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit because this is a subject that I've covered extensively here on the channel. And this is an actual news story. This is something these people are actually trying to do. Scientists are building a DMT machine that will help them, quote, talk to aliens. So if you've followed my channel for a while, then you know that I don't believe in these aliens or extraterrestrials or beings from another planet, as we've seen in Star Trek and Star Wars and just countless other science fiction movies and TV shows and books. I believe that these aliens, specifically the gray aliens, are actually fallen angels or demonic entities. So since we cover the language of symbols so much here on my channel, I wanted to show you a really good example of what I'm trying to convey here. This is the Apple logo. Most of us are familiar with this. And this is what happens whenever you put two of the logos together. You actually get a secret message or a hidden symbol. And of course, that's the gray alien. So the Apple logo itself is connected to the idea of Adam and Eve and the apple, right? Eating the forbidden fruit. And now we have this connection to the gray alien. Once again, in my opinion, these are the fallen ones. There's also lots of research out there you can find about how the so-called Illuminati or the shadow controllers are actually in communion with these beings. And they gain insight, technology, through rituals and contacting these fallen angels. One of the most famous examples of this comes to us through Aleister Crowley, who is a very well-known occultist. If you're not familiar with him, please look into Aleister Crowley, and you'll see that he was performing some of these dark rituals and actually connected with, again, what I believe is a fallen being, a fallen angel, demonic entity, that he called Lam, L-A-M. And Lam was a source and a guide for Aleister Crowley. And this is an image of Lam that Aleister Crowley drew himself, so you take a look at it, it very much looks like a gray alien to me.
Chinese researchers just teleported the first object ever from Earth to orbit. So this is a story from a couple months ago. A friend sent me, as found in the Collective Evolution publication. So of course it's in a very new age leaning website here. But this is talking about the whole quantum satellite issue. So here this is talking about this quantum satellite that the Chinese put up about a year ago. I believe Gans did a video when they put this up, where they're experimenting with quantum computing and quote-unquote space. So this is kind of interesting. It's official. Researchers in China just teleported the first object ever from the ground to orbit. We wrote about the study in a recent article we published going more into the entanglement aspect, which could mean instantaneous transmission of information or that information is traveling faster than the speed of light. So a year ago, a Long March 2D rocket was launched from Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in the Gobi Desert, containing a satellite called Mesius, named after an ancient Chinese philosopher. MIT Technology Review describes Mesius as a highly sensitive photon receiver that can detect the quantum states of single photons fired from the ground, and explains that that's important because it should allow scientists to test the technological building blocks for various quantum feats such as entanglement, cryptography, and teleportation. The team created the quantum network in order to use it to teleport objects from Earth to orbit. Earlier this week, the Chinese research team presented their initial findings from their first experiment. To conduct the experiment, the researchers created 2 entangled photons, then beamed one of them to the satellite while keeping the other at ground level. They then measured them both to ensure that they were still entangled, confirming that they could teleport protons using this method. Over the following month, they sent millions more photons into orbit, finding positive results on almost 1,000 of the tests. Quote, we report that the first quantum teleportation of independent single-photon qubits from a ground observatory to a low Earth orbit satellite through an uplink channel with a distance of up to 1,400 kilometers, explained the Chinese team. This work establishes the first ground-to-satellite uplink for faithful and ultra-long-distance quantum teleportation, an essential step toward global-scale quantum internet, stated the team. Interesting. And then they go into teleportation as it pertains to quantum states, quantum entanglement. But this is really, I won't rehash all the rest of this here. But it's interesting because not only, so it's quantum computing involving the use of qubits, which supposedly can be ones and zeros at the same time, and using their quantum state to supposedly solve very complex computations much faster than a traditional CPU can, and all that side. But the whole idea of using quantum entanglement, so quantum computing kind of entails a lot of different things that supposedly are now impossible with conventional computing. It's not just the speed and the power and the, basically pulling computations from the quote-unquote quantum realm in the sort of crystal ball divination kind of way. But now they're talking about using these spooky actions, quote-unquote, as Einstein coined the phrase, supposedly. But this idea of, using entanglement as a way of sort of like a crazy Wi-Fi like method. So when you really put all these pieces together, they're actually talking about a global scale quantum internet, where, as crazy as it sounds, what they're sort of working towards is that we're going to have this internet of everything connected to quantum computers that's the technology that's going to take us to the next level of AI. And they're pulling computations and answers from the quote-unquote quantum realm, and they can talk to each other through the quantum realm. They can talk to each other through quote-unquote quantum entanglement. So it's where, Wi-Fi or any sort of electromagnetic, any sort of devices that are connected through conventional, even 5G technology, even this new 5G technology is still based on sending out, wave signals, whatever the frequency is, and then those electrons supposedly going through the air, going from point A to point B, even if it's at crazy fast speeds, using quantum entanglement to actually connect devices and connect technology. It's just a whole nother insane level of magical technology that they're talking about. So according to them, you could be on basic if you had two if they're able to entangle photons at will now and then utilize that entanglement to actually, whatever you do to one photon happens to the other photon wherever it is in the universe simultaneously faster than the speed of light. So you could communicate from one side of the Copernican universe to the other side instantaneously through quantum entanglement. I mean, we're really living in this ridiculous occult sci-fi reality. I don't even have words anymore.
They took some DMT. And in the past, they said they had seen pyramids, pagan temples, Hindu gods, minotaurs, centaurs, and all sorts of creatures. But in this most recent trip they took together, the first thing he saw was a Cambodian temple, and his friend saw a pyramid with an eye on top and people worshipping it. Another strange effect of DMT was that when he closed his eyes, he could still seem to see his surroundings as if his eyelids were transparent. With DMT, he had out-of-body experiences, he believed. Himself and his friends saw or heard things that they didn't know about until they looked them up later, so they were actually learning things on their DMT trip. For example, before this guy got into Hinduism, which he's currently into now, something said in his head, sounding like a voice, "I am God," and he found out later that this is a phrase that Hindus say. His friend saw the Hindu deity Ganesh and didn't know what it was, but described it perfectly. So after seeing and hearing these things on his DMT trip and then researching it later, it actually got him into worshipping idols, such as Vishnu, and studying the Mahabharata. He thought it was cool, and he felt that all paths led to God anyway. If it weren't for his brother getting smacked by God literally by a golden hand while using DMT, he would have continued doing so. It did help him understand a little bit about the New World Order, like their belief in a so-called Golden Age. He saw parallels to the Bible like fallen angels and Nephilim. There's even evidence of historic high-tech battles in India on his DMT trips, like radiation and sand fused into glass as if there were nuclear explosions many, many years ago there. Even in Greek mythology there are stories of giants and of gods mating with humans. So after he studied all things Illuminati, New Age teachings, the New World Order, sorcery, UFOs, and all this other stuff, he finally came to the conclusion that he was contacting fallen angels, and that he felt this in his DMT trips. He felt that drug DMT was giving him demonic spirits and full access to them, and he was allowing them to have full access to his mind. And it appeared that the enemy can manipulate the mind of a DMT user any way he pleases.
Are you as a human being in your conscious mind really an independent thinking being with independent thought? Or are you ultimately just a function of a deterministic, mechanistic universe? So the person trying to hold on to the allegedly scientific fact of evolution is faced with a choice. They have to choose between either consciousness is a complete illusion and meaningless, and therefore their whole identity as a human being, which seems to have choice, seems to have true personhood, is all a lie, it's all an illusion. It's all just, you're just a collection of random chemicals and atoms and energy that randomly organized itself and will eventually disorganize and reorganize into a different organism or a different form. Or in order to avoid such a nihilistic conclusion, the person will embrace the idea that consciousness is real and therefore everything is part of that consciousness. Everything in the self-creating, self-organizing universe must therefore be self-creating and self-organizing because it is a part of that true consciousness, that true personhood that permeates everything. And thus, you've gone full circle back to the ancient mystical belief we call pantheism. And so from this framework of evolution and consciousness, it's honestly not surprising at all to see people embracing the idea that other conscious beings that were self-created out in other parts of the self-organizing cosmos, other people still tend to think of evolution, whether it's biological or Darwinian evolution or cosmic evolution, is simply a materialistic, mechanistic worldview. But really it is not. And as that opening clip there of Alan Watt kind of emphasizes, ultimately deep down, an honest appraisal of the theory of evolution is that it is mysticism and it is pantheism. It's pantheism because it says that the universe is self-creating and self-organizing, and that everything is matter and energy, and that matter and energy are interchangeable. But then there's always that pesky question of consciousness. What is consciousness? Most people...
We say, well, first of all, in the beginning, there was nothing but gas and rock. And then intelligence happened to arise in it, you know, like a sort of fungus or slime on the top of the whole thing. But we're thinking in a way, you see, that disconnects the intelligence from the rocks. Where there are rocks, watch out, because the rocks are going eventually to come alive.